What up YouTube, the Communist Messiah here. Sorry I haven't been on making videos lately. I've been a little ill, but I'm still not 100%, but I'm back. So, I was trawling YouTube the other day, as you do, and I came across this user called RFVids. Now, in future, if I ever tackle a YouTuber directly, I will put a link in the description so you can find the video or user that I'm directly addressing. However, I won't be doing it this time because there's no point, because they've actually blocked comments on everything. You can't even comment on their channel. You can't do it, but I digress. RFVids never uploads any original work. But that's alright, there are plenty of YouTubers who don't do that. They take snippets of documentaries and TV shows, etc. and upload them, so that's not what bothers me. The video in question, however, comes from a lecture given by a Michael Licona. Now, ignoring the fact that they actually managed to misspell this guy's name, they have also put a PhD at the end, probably to give him more credibility. After all, he's gone through university, he's gotten a doctorate, right? That makes him more intelligent, right? Well, let's not forget that in this day and age you can get a PhD in Pokemon if you've got a teacher. So I wasn't particularly won over by the honorific at the end. And one quick Google search later, I found that his PhD was in New Testament studies. That's right, folks, he has a doctorate in gospel reading. So, onto the video and the topic that it covers. It's a fairly difficult to answer question that the video tries to tackle, and it's whether or not Christianity stole parts of other religions. Now, I don't know what I was expecting from a 3-minute long video, but I was hoping that we would see some classical thinkers like Aquinas, or Augustine, or Anselm, or maybe a reference to the Library of Alexandria, or the Patriarchs, or any other Christian philosopher, or some form of religious or philosophical text from which the arguments both for and against could be drawn. That's what you'd expect. However, what I got was the Da Vinci Code. Every point he was aiming to disprove came from the Da Vinci Code, a novel, a work of fiction. I was disappointed, but I kept on watching, waiting to see what mind-blowing evidence that our Doctor of New Testament Studies was going to provide and prove the genuine nature of his religion. So, he goes into his claim. He goes into the claim made by the Da Vinci Code that this one god called Mithras, or Mithra, who is a Zoroastrian god, basically had a similar life to Jesus, born on 25th of December, died, buried in a rock tomb, came back from the dead 3 days later. So, he brings this up, and then he enters the fact check, where he attempts to disprove all of this without once citing anything. No references to what books were used to find his knowledge, no evidence to where it came from, no quotes from the scholars he keeps mentioning, nothing. So, he does say that there was a god called Mithras, and the religion is still ongoing, by the way. Probably the most famous Zoroastrian ever was Freddie Mercury. So, the religion still exists. And that he did in fact predate Jesus. So Mithras was around prior to Jesus. That religion existed prior to Jesus. But none of the claims of the gods dying and coming back from the grave are pre-Jesus. They are all post-Jesus, so they copied Christianity. Okay, I have very little knowledge of Zoroastrian religion. I haven't studied it. But I do have a fair amount of knowledge about the Egyptian religion, which predated Christianity by about 3,000 years. And Horus, one of the principal gods of Egyptian mythology, lived a full life of events that bear an extreme similarity to Jesus. Bearing in mind, these are only from the documents that remain. Things like the destruction of the Library of Alexandria kind of thrown a spanner in the works. But there are still a list of events that have been recorded as Horus having done them prior to Jesus being born. So, some accounts say that he was born of a virgin. The destruction of the library didn't help prove this, but oh well. He walked on the Nile. This one has been proven. So, yeah, walking on water was his gig. Died, rose again, all before Jesus. Turned water into wine, before Jesus. And just in case you were wondering, unlike our gospel reading doctor, I am actually proving where I got my stuff from. So, I am willing to prove where my information is coming from. So, then he talks about a god called Adonis. And I can only assume that he's actually mispronouncing Adonis from Greek mythology, because no search I have ever made has actually come back with anything but Adonis. But being the first, he says that Adonis was the first god to come back from the dead. Well, this is demonstrably false. We'll ignore Horus, we'll ignore Baal, we'll ignore all of the Western gods, because you can make a claim that all of that stuff came after Jesus. Eastern gods. Do a quick Google search on Asian gods that came back from the dead. You'll find a hefty list. That's all I'm going to say on that one. And every single one of them predate Christianity by a few centuries. So, you know, his argument is incorrect there. So, next he goes on to talk about how it is alleged that Constantine moved the Christian Sabbath to a Sunday from the Jewish Saturday. Well, this one may or may not be true. We don't really know. However, what we do know is that the dates and times of Christmas and Easter have in fact been altered to fit pagan rituals. The winter solstice, December 21st, and the vernal equinox in spring. We've proven this. Mostly because, given the time frames of Jesus' life, well, his birth was not in December. It was probably around March. And his death, we have no clue. There's no way of determining when he died. Around Easter time, it's as good a time as any, I guess. But we don't really know. We can't prove a thing. But I digress. There's no real way to put a timestamp on Jesus' birth, because the two accounts in the Bible, from Matthew and Luke, happen around 10 years apart. The census mentioned in Luke doesn't correspond with Herod being the king in Matthew, because Herod had died about 10 years prior to the Cyrenius census. So there was about a decade between them. So Jesus would probably have already had the meeting in the temple where he said, "Did you not know I would be in my Father's house?" by the time he was being born in Luke's Gospel. So next he talks about the first Christians being Jews. That statement is a blatant self-contradiction. If the first Christians were still Jews, then they were not Christians, right? They may have been Jews, but they aren't anymore. They were Christian, right? And Jesus himself said, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So it is unlikely that the early Christians would really have minded a single day delay on their Sabbath if they believed that God was the one instructing them to shift it to Sunday. Which is where the whole claim that it was shifted to coincide with Jesus' resurrection kind of fits in. But again, we don't really know whether Jesus was raised from the dead at all, and if he was, whether it was actually on Easter Sunday, because let's face it, he was treated as a common criminal. They kept records, like the Roman Empire kept records, but they weren't going to go into that minute detail. Anyway, Then comes my favourite line of the entire video. Nearly every scholar agrees that the change from Saturday to Sunday was to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. He makes this huge declarative statement that apparently almost every scholar that studies this in the world has come to this one conclusion, that the switch from Saturday to Sunday was because of Jesus' resurrection. And does he provide a single name to back up his point? One of these scholars, any one of them, to support his point? No, he doesn't. In the end, his arguments are groundless and defenseless. All you have to do is buy a book on Egyptian mythology and everything he said goes out the window. There is nothing original about Christianity. End of story. See you later, YouTube.